You're standing in front of the most elite warriors in the world. Men who've survived the impossible, conquered their fears, and broken barriers that seemed unbreakable. For 12 years, they've held a record that nobody thought could be touched. These aren't just soldiers, they're legends. Now, imagine being the person who looks them in the eye and says, "I'll take a turn," not because you have to, not because someone dared you, but because something deep inside whispers that records aren't meant to last forever. And sometimes the most unlikely person carries the key to the impossible. This is the story of how one woman didn't just break a 12-year SEAL team record. She shattered it so completely that it forced an entire military community to rewrite what they thought they knew about human limits. But breaking records? That was just the beginning. What happened next would test everything she believed about herself, about courage, and about what it truly means to earn your place among warriors. Some stories are about winning. This one is about discovering that the real victory isn't crossing the finish line first. It's having the courage to step up to a line that everyone else said was impossible for you to cross. Are you ready to witness what happens when unstoppable determination meets unshakable doubt? When years of being underestimated finally meet their match? This is her story. This is the moment everything changed. Sarah Martinez had always been the girl who didn't quite fit the mold. Growing up in a small Texas town where Friday night football was religion and traditional gender roles were carved in stone, she learned early that wanting something different made you different. And different in Millfield, Texas, wasn't always welcome. Her father, Miguel Martinez, worked double shifts at the local manufacturing plant, his hands permanently stained with grease and his back constantly aching from years of bending over machinery. Her mother, Elena, cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the hill, coming home each evening with stories of beautiful homes and lives that seemed like fairy tales. They were good people, hardworking people, but they dreamed small dreams and expected their daughter to do the same. Sarah had other plans. From the time she was 8 years old, watching her older brother Carlos do push-ups in their tiny backyard, she knew she wanted to be strong. Not just physically strong, though that mattered too, but strong enough to write her own story. Carlos was preparing for the military, following in their uncle's footsteps, and something about the discipline and purpose called to her like a siren song. Girls don't do that, her mother would say gently when Sarah asked about military training. You're smart, Mija. You could be a teacher, maybe a nurse. Something nice, something safe. But safe wasn't what Sarah craved. Safe was watching other people live their dreams while you settled for what was expected. Safe was accepting that certain doors were simply not meant for you to open. In high school, while her classmates worried about prom dates and college majors, Sarah was running 5 miles before dawn, doing pull-ups on the old jungle gym at the elementary school, and reading every book about military history she could get her hands on. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, became an unexpected ally, quietly ordering books about female pioneers in the military and leaving them on Sarah's usual table. You know, Mrs. Henderson said one afternoon as Sarah checked out a biography of Harriet Tubman, courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway. Those words would echo in Sarah's mind for years to come. Her high school counselor, Mr. Thompson, was less supportive. When Sarah mentioned her interest in military service during a college planning session, he leaned back in his chair and gave her the look she'd grown accustomed to, the one that said he knew better than she did about what her life should look like. Sarah, you're a bright girl with excellent grades. Why waste that potential on something so physical? Have you considered education? You'd make an excellent teacher. I want to serve my country, Sarah replied simply. There are many ways to serve, ways that are more suitable. Suitable. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. Everything about her life was supposed to be suitable, appropriate, expected. She was supposed to want suitable things, dream suitable dreams, live a suitable life. But Sarah had never been suitable, and she was tired of pretending otherwise. The night of her high school graduation, as her classmates celebrated at parties across town, Sarah sat on her bedroom floor with military recruitment brochures spread around her like fallen leaves. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. Each branch offered a different path to the same destination, a chance to prove that she was more than what her small town expected her to be. Her brother Carlos had joined the army straight out of high school and was now stationed in Germany, sending home letters full of stories about brotherhood, purpose, and challenges that pushed him beyond anything he'd imagined possible. But as Sarah read about different military specialties, one kept catching her attention: Navy. The Navy offered something the other branches didn't: the possibility of pushing physical and mental limits in ways that seemed almost superhuman. The more she read about Navy training, about the elite units that emerge from impossible selection processes, the more something inside her stirred to life. She wasn't just reading about careers. She was reading about transformation. The conversation with her parents came 3 weeks after graduation. Sarah had been accepted to the local community college and was expected to start classes in the fall, majoring in education like her mother had always dreamed. Instead, she walked into the kitchen where her parents were having their evening coffee and placed the Navy recruitment materials on the table. The silence stretched longer than Sarah had expected. Finally, her father spoke. "Mija, the military, it's different for girls. It's hard, dangerous. You could get hurt. I could get hurt crossing the street. Papa, I could get hurt staying exactly where I am." Her mother picked up one of the brochures, studying the photos of ships and sailors with the same expression she wore when examining a stain she wasn't sure she could remove. "But why the Navy, Sarah? Why not something easier?" "Because easy doesn't change anything. Easy doesn't prove anything." "Prove what? To who?" Sarah looked at her parents, these good, loving people who had worked so hard to give her opportunities they'd never had, and tried to find words for something she barely understood herself. "To me. I need to prove it to me." The recruiting station in the next town over was nothing like the glossy brochures had suggested. The building was generic, institutional, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly sick. Sergeant First Class Johnson, the Navy recruiter, was a compact man with sharp eyes who looked like he could see right through any excuse or hesitation. "Most people who walk through that door think they know what they want," he said after Sarah had filled out the initial paperwork. "Very few actually know what they're asking for." "What am I asking for?" "To be transformed. To discover what you're really made of. To find out if you're as tough as you think you are." He leaned forward slightly. "Are you?" Sarah thought about her mother's worried face, her father's protective instincts, her guidance counselor's dismissive attitude. She thought about all the times she'd been told to want something different, be something different, dream something smaller. "I guess we'll find out." Boot camp was a shock to the system in ways Sarah hadn't anticipated. She'd prepared physically, running longer distances, doing more push-ups, building strength and endurance. What she hadn't prepared for was the mental challenge of being constantly tested, questioned, and pushed beyond every limit she thought she had. The other recruits were a mix of backgrounds and motivations. Some, like Tommy Rodriguez from Los Angeles, were following family traditions spanning generations. Others, like Jennifer Walsh from Ohio, were seeking structure and purpose after difficult childhoods. A few, like Marcus Thompson from Detroit, were running from something they wouldn't talk about. And then there was Sarah, the girl from small-town Texas who wanted to prove something she couldn't quite name. The drill instructors didn't care about anyone's background or motivation. They cared about one thing: finding out who would quit and who would find a way to keep going when everything inside them screamed to stop. Petty Officer Davis became the voice of Sarah's nightmares and, eventually, her transformation. He was relentless in his assessment that she didn't belong there, that she was wasting everyone's time, that she'd be on a bus home within a week. "Martinez, you think this is summer camp? You think we're here to make friends and sing songs around a campfire?" "No, sir." "Then, why are you moving like my grandmother after hip surgery? Why are you breathing like you've never run a mile in your life? Why are you here taking up space that could go to someone who actually wants it?" The questions were designed to break her down, to make her question every decision that had led her to that moment. And there were times, usually around 3 a.m., when the alarm went off for another surprise training exercise, when Sarah wondered if everyone had been right. Maybe she was wasting her time. Maybe she didn't belong here. But then she'd remember Mrs. Henderson's words about courage, and she'd find just enough strength to take one more step. The physical challenges were brutal, but straightforward. Run faster, climb higher, lift more, endure longer. Sarah discovered muscles she didn't know she had and pushed past pain barriers she'd never imagined existed. But the mental challenges were what really tested her resolve. Learning to trust teammates when failure meant everyone suffered. Staying calm under pressure when instructors screamed contradictory orders. Making split-second decisions with incomplete information while exhausted and stressed. These weren't just military skills. They were life skills for someone who planned to live an extraordinary life. Halfway through boot camp, Sarah received a letter from home. Her mother wrote about the neighbors asking where she'd gone, about her old friends starting their college classes, about how quiet the house had become. There was love in every line, but also an underlying question. Was this really worth it? That night, Sarah sat on her narrow bunk and wrote a letter back. She told her mother about the sunrise runs that made her feel like she could conquer the world. She described the satisfaction of mastering skills she'd never imagined learning. She tried to explain the feeling of being part of something bigger than herself, something that demanded the best version of who she could become. What she didn't write about was the doubt that crept in during the hardest moments. She didn't mention the time she'd questioned whether she was strong enough, smart enough, brave enough to earn her place here. She didn't describe the loneliness of being different, of wanting something that seemed to surprise everyone who knew her. Instead, she focused on the growing certainty that this path, difficult as it was, felt right in a way that nothing else ever had. This was her story to write, her challenge to meet, her chance to become someone she could respect. The letter ended with a promise. She would make them proud. But, more importantly, she was learning to make herself proud. Graduation from boot camp felt like both an ending and a beginning. Sarah had survived the initial test, proved she belonged in the Navy, earned the right to wear the uniform. But as she looked ahead to advanced training and eventual assignment, she knew the real challenges were still waiting. She learned to push her body beyond what she thought possible. She developed mental toughness that would serve her for the rest of her life. She discovered that the girl from small-town Texas who didn't fit the mold was exactly who the Navy needed her to be. But she'd also learned that proving yourself once wasn't enough. In the military, you prove yourself every day, with every challenge, with every decision to continue pushing forward when it would be easier to settle for good enough. As Sarah packed her belongings and prepared for the next phase of her journey, she thought about all the people who had doubted her along the way. Not with anger, but with gratitude. Their doubts had become fuel for her determination. Their limitations had become her motivation to prove that limitations were often just excuses in disguise. She was no longer the girl who didn't fit the mold. She was the woman who had broken the mold and built something better in its place. And this was just the beginning of what she could become. 3 years in her Navy career, Petty Officer Sarah Martinez had found her rhythm. Stationed at Naval Base Coronado in California, she worked in logistics coordination, ensuring that supplies and equipment reached the right places at the right times. It was important work, detail-oriented and demanding, but something inside her remained restless. Sarah had proven she belonged in the Navy. She'd earned respect from her peers and commendation from her superiors. Her efficiency ratings were consistently excellent, and she'd been recommended for advancement twice. By all measures, she was successful. So why did she feel like she was playing it safe? The answer came to her one morning as she watched a group of Navy SEALs running past her office building. There was something different about the way they moved, the way they carried themselves. These weren't just sailors doing their jobs. These were warriors who had pushed themselves through the most demanding training in the world and emerged transformed. Sarah had heard stories about SEAL training, whispered legends about impossible physical challenges, and mental tests that broke strongmen. She'd heard about the legendary obstacle course at the Naval Special Warfare Center, about records that stood for years because so few people were capable of even attempting to break them. That afternoon, during her lunch break, Sarah found herself walking toward the Special Warfare Center. She told herself she was just curious, just taking a walk to clear her head. But deep down, she knew she was being called towards something that would change everything. The training complex was impressive in its simplicity. No fancy equipment, no high-tech gadgets, just pure, functional challenges designed to test every aspect of human capability. Sarah watched from a distance as SEAL trainees tackled obstacles that looked like they belonged in a medieval torture chamber rather than a modern military facility. Impressive, isn't it? Sarah turned to find Chief Petty Officer David Kane standing beside her. She recognized him from around the base, a legendary SEAL with deployments in multiple combat zones and a reputation for excellence that preceded him wherever he went. Yes, sir. It's incredible to watch. Most people watch for a few minutes and walk away grateful they don't have to do it themselves, Kane said, studying her face. You've been standing here for 20 minutes. What are you really looking at? Sarah hesitated. The honest answer felt too big, too presumptuous to say out loud. But something about Kane's direct manner encouraged honesty. I'm looking at what's possible. Kane nodded slowly. For them, or for you? I don't know yet. Good answer. Come with me. Kane led Sarah to a small building that served as a museum and information center for the special warfare community. The walls were covered with photos, achievements, records, and tributes to SEALs who had given everything in service to their country. But what caught Sarah's attention was a display case in the corner dedicated to training records. See that one there? Kane pointed to a plaque that read, Obstacle Course Record, 8 minutes, 47 seconds. Set by Petty Officer James Mitchell, 2019. Standing record, 12 years. Sarah stared at the numbers. 8 minutes and 47 seconds to complete what she'd been watching trainees struggle through for much longer periods. It seemed impossibly fast. Mitchell was a phenomenal athlete, Kane continued. 6'4", built like a machine, trained specifically for that course for months before he set the record. Most people who attempt it take 15 to 20 minutes, if they complete it at all. Have many people try to break it? Every SEAL who's gone through training since 2019 has tried. Some came close, within 30 seconds or so. But Mitchell's record is held because it requires a perfect combination of strength, speed, technique, and mental focus that very few people possess. Sarah nodded, still staring at the plaque. Something was stirring inside her. A familiar feeling she'd first experienced in high school when everyone told her military service wasn't for girls like her. What would it take for someone to attempt it? Someone not in SEAL training, I mean. Kane turned to look at her directly. Hypothetically, they'd need permission from command, which would require demonstrating they had the physical capability to attempt it safely. They need to pass a preliminary fitness assessment that most people couldn't handle. And they need a compelling reason why command should allow a non-SEAL to attempt something that's considered an internal community challenge. What would qualify as a compelling reason? Kane was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could see him evaluating her in a way that felt both intimidating and oddly reassuring. Martinez, right? I've heard good things about your work. Reliable, dedicated, professional. He paused. Why are you really asking these questions? Sarah looked back at the plaque, then at the photos of SEALs who had pushed themselves beyond every conceivable limit in service of something greater than themselves. She thought about the girl from Texas who had wanted something more than what everyone expected her to want. Because I think I might want to try. The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah immediately wanted to take them back. They sounded presumptuous, naive, maybe even disrespectful to the men who had earned the right to call themselves SEALs through trials she could barely imagine. But Kane didn't laugh or dismiss her. Instead, he studied her face with the same intensity she'd seen him use when evaluating complex tactical situations. You understand what you're suggesting? This isn't just about being in good shape or having determination. This is about attempting something that the best trained warriors in the world have been trying to beat for 12 years. I understand that it might be impossible. Will be impossible, For me, probably. Then, why even consider it? Sarah thought about all the times in her life when she'd been told something was impossible for her. College wasn't for girls like her. The military wasn't for girls like her. Success wasn't for girls like her. Each time, she'd found a way to prove that impossible was often just another word for unexpected. Because impossible is interesting. Kane smiled for the first time in their conversation. That's either the most foolish thing I've heard in years, or the most honest. Probably both. Over the following weeks, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. She researched the obstacle course, studying videos and descriptions of each challenge. The course consisted of 12 obstacles designed to test different aspects of physical and mental capability. Rope climbs, wall traversals, tire carries, crawling sections, balance challenges, and more. Each obstacle was formidable on its own, combined into a single course that demanded sustained maximum effort. They created a challenge that separated the exceptional from the merely excellent. Sarah began modifying her personal training routine, incorporating movements and challenges that would prepare her for what she might face. She started timing herself on shorter obstacle sequences, studying technique videos, and pushing her fitness to levels she'd never attempted before. The work was addictive. Each small improvement felt like evidence that maybe, just maybe, she was capable of more than anyone expected. But it also made her realize how far she had to go. After a month of unofficial preparation, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She requested a meeting with her commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Patricia Walsh, to discuss what she privately called the Mitchell Project. Commander Walsh was known for being direct, fair, and intolerant of anything that wasted time or resources. Sarah had prepared for the conversation carefully, but she knew that all the preparation in the world couldn't guarantee the response she hoped for. "Martinez, I've been reviewing your service record," Walsh began after Sarah had explained her request. "Excellent performance, strong leadership potential, no disciplinary issues. Help me understand why someone with your track record wants to attempt something that has no bearing on your current duties or career progression." "Because I think I can do it, ma'am." "Based on what? Have you completed preliminary assessments? Do you have experience with obstacle course racing? Have you consulted with fitness specialists about the physical demands?" Sarah had done none of those things officially, but she'd done all of them informally. More importantly, she'd done something else that she couldn't quantify, but knew was real. She discovered that wanting something badly enough could be its own form of preparation. "No, ma'am. I have none of those credentials. What I have is 12 years of watching that record stand and thinking that maybe it's time for someone unexpected to take a shot at it." Walsh leaned back in her chair, and Sarah could see her weighing factors that went far beyond Sarah's individual request. Allowing a non-SEAL to attempt the record could be seen as disrespectful to the SEAL community. It could also be seen as a publicity stunt or a waste of resources. On the other hand, it could demonstrate the Navy's commitment to excellence regardless of specialty or gender. If I were to consider this request, and I'm not saying I am, what would you need from command? Permission to take the preliminary fitness assessment, access to the course for practice runs, and a date to make the official attempt. And if you fail, if you get injured, if you embarrass yourself, and by extension this command, Sarah had thought about all of those possibilities. Failure was not just possible, but probable. Injury was a real risk. Embarrassment was almost guaranteed if she couldn't complete the course in a respectable time. Then I fail, and everyone learns something about the difference between courage and stupidity. Walsh was quiet for several minutes, and Sarah could see her running through scenarios, considering implications, weighing risks against potential benefits. Finally, she spoke. "I'm going to do something that probably violates every principle of sound military judgment. I'm going to give you a chance to prove you're not completely out of your mind." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "You have 6 weeks to prepare. You'll take the preliminary assessment in 4 weeks. If you pass that, you'll get one official attempt at the record. If you fail the preliminary assessment, this conversation never happened." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me yet, Martinez. You have no idea what you've just asked for." As Sarah left the commander's office, she felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror that reminded her of the first day of boot camp. She'd gotten what she wanted, a chance to attempt something impossible. Now, she had to figure out how to turn that chance into something real. The next 6 weeks would test everything she thought she knew about her own capabilities. They would push her beyond every limit she discovered in 3 years of Navy service. They would force her to confront the difference between wanting something and being willing to sacrifice everything to achieve it. But as Sarah walked back to her office, already mentally planning her training schedule for the next 6 weeks, she felt something she hadn't experienced since those early days in boot camp: the thrill of chasing something that scared her. That night, Sarah called her parents for the first time in months. Her mother was delighted to hear from her, full of questions about her life in California and updates about neighbors and friends from home. Her father asked about her work, her future plans, whether she was happy. "I'm about to attempt something that might be impossible," Sarah found herself saying. "What do you mean, Mija?" her father asked. I'm going to try to break a record that's been standing for 12 years. A record set by someone who was bigger, stronger, and more experienced than me." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you sure this is wise?" "No, I'm sure it's necessary." "Necessary for what?" Sarah looked out her window at the lights of the base, at the place where she'd learned to push beyond what she thought possible, at the community that was about to let her attempt something that would either prove her capabilities or reveal her limitations. Necessary for finding out who I really am when everything is on the line. The first week of preparation nearly broke Sarah before she'd even begun. Chief Kane had connected her with Master Chief Rodriguez, a SEAL instructor with 25 years of experience who had agreed to help design a training program that would give Sarah a realistic chance at passing the preliminary assessment. Their first meeting took place at 0500 hours on a Monday morning that felt colder and darker than any morning had a right to feel. "Martinez, I want to be clear about something before we start," Rodriguez said as they stood in front of a modified version of the obstacle course. "I've agreed to help you because Chief Kane asked, and because I respect people who chase impossible dreams. But I won't waste my time or yours pretending this is going to be easy." Sarah nodded, tried to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I understand, Master Chief." "Do you? Let me show you what you're up against." For the next hour, Rodriguez walked Sarah through each obstacle, explaining not just the physical requirements, but the technique, timing, and mental approach needed to complete each challenge efficiently. The rope climb required upper body strength most women didn't possess, but also perfect technique to avoid wasting energy. The wall traversal demanded finger strength, core stability, and the ability to solve movement problems under pressure. The tire carry looked straightforward until you realized that completing it quickly required finding the perfect balance between speed and energy conservation. "The record isn't just about being strong or fast," Rodriguez explained as they stood in front of the final obstacle, a rope traverse across a sand pit that had defeated countless strong men. "It's about being strong and fast and smart and efficient all at the same time for 8 minutes and 47 seconds without making a single significant mistake. Has anyone come close recently? Last month, Petty Officer Jackson finished in 9 minutes, 15 seconds. He's 6'2", benches 350, and has been training specifically for this attempt for 8 months. He made one small mistake on the rope climb that cost him about 20 seconds, and one technique error on the wall traverse that cost him another 8 seconds. Sarah did the math quickly. Jackson had missed the record by 28 seconds, and 2 small mistakes had probably cost him 30 seconds or more. The margin for error was essentially non-existent. "What do you think my realistic target should be for the preliminary assessment?" Sarah asked. Rodriguez studied her for a long moment. "Complete the course. That's it. Don't worry about time. Don't worry about records. Just prove you can get from start to finish without injuring yourself." It was a reasonable goal, but Sarah found herself thinking about Jackson's attempt. If someone that strong and experienced had come within 30 seconds, what would it take for her to go faster? The thought was both motivating and terrifying. That afternoon, Sarah began the most intense training regimen of her life. Rodriguez had designed a program that would prepare her for each obstacle while building the overall fitness and mental toughness needed to sustain maximum effort for nearly 9 minutes. The rope climbing sessions were particularly humbling. Sarah had always been strong for her size, but the ropes demanded a specific type of strength she'd never developed. Her first attempt resulted in barely making it halfway up before her grip failed, and she slid back down, rope burns on her hands, serving as painful reminders of how far she had to go. "The rope doesn't care about your feelings," Rodriguez said as Sarah shook out her burning hands. "It doesn't care about your determination or your good intentions. It only responds to technique and strength." So let's work on technique. Over the following days, Rodriguez taught Sarah the proper climbing technique, using her legs to pinch the rope, creating friction that would support her weight while allowing her arms to pull efficiently. It was a revelation. What had seemed impossible during her first attempt became merely difficult once she understood the mechanics. But understanding technique and mastering it were two different things. Sarah's hands developed calluses that tore and reformed. Her forearms burned with fatigue that seemed to penetrate bone deep. Her shoulders ached from pulling her body weight up, rope after rope, session after session. The wall traverse was equally challenging, but in a different way. The obstacle required moving horizontally across a 12-foot wall, using only small handholds and footholds, while suspended 8 feet above the ground. Strength mattered, but technique and problem-solving were equally important. "Every hold has a right way and a wrong way to use it," Rodriguez explained as he demonstrated the optimal hand positions. "The wrong way might work once or twice, but it wastes energy and increases your chance of falling. The right way feels natural once you learn it, and it allows you to move efficiently." Sarah spent hours learning to read the wall, identifying the sequence of moves that would carry her across most efficiently. She practiced until the movement pattern became automatic, until she could complete the traverse even when exhausted and struggling to think clearly. But it was the tire carry that truly tested her limits. The obstacle involved picking up a 200-pound tire and carrying it 50 yards, then carrying it back to the starting position. For someone of Sarah's size, the tire was almost comically oversized. She could barely get her arms around it, and lifting it off the ground required recruiting every muscle in her body. "This is where being smaller might actually help you," Rodriguez said, watching Sarah struggle with her first attempt. "You can't overpower the tire like some of the bigger guys try to do. You have to find the most efficient way to move with it." They experimented with different carrying positions. Bear hug style, which distributed weight evenly but made it hard to see where she was going. Shoulder carry, which was more efficient but required perfect balance, and rolling, which was fastest over long distances but difficult to control precisely. After 2 weeks of daily practice, Sarah found her rhythm with each obstacle. She was nowhere near record pace, but she was completing each challenge consistently and learning to maintain intensity even when fatigue made every movement feel like she was moving through water. The mental training was just as demanding as the physical preparation. "The course will hurt you," Rodriguez explained during one of their evening planning sessions. "It's designed to hurt you. Your muscles will burn, your lungs will scream, your brain will tell you to slow down or quit. Learning to function effectively while experiencing maximum discomfort is as important as any physical skill." They practiced pushing through discomfort during training sessions. Rodriguez would have Sarah complete obstacles while exhausted, while confused by contradictory instructions, while dealing with equipment failures or unexpected changes to the course layout. "The record attempt won't go perfectly," he reminded her constantly. "Something will go wrong. You'll make a mistake, or equipment will malfunction, or you'll hit the wall physically earlier than you expect. Your ability to adapt and keep pushing when things don't go according to plan will determine whether you succeed or fail." 3 weeks into training, Sarah attempted her first complete run-through of the course. The goal wasn't to set a fast time, but to experience the full challenge, to understand how the obstacles felt when completed in sequence without rest. The run was a disaster. Sarah completed the first 4 obstacles in decent time, but by the 5th challenge, a crawling section under low barriers, she was already struggling. Her technique fell apart under fatigue. She made positioning errors that cost precious seconds and extra energy. By the time she reached the rope traverse at the end, she was barely able to maintain her grip. Her final time was 14 minutes and 32 seconds, more than 5 minutes slower than the record. "That was terrible," Sarah said as she lay on her back in the sand, trying to catch her breath. "That was baseline," Rodriguez replied. "Now we know what we're working with." But Sarah could see the concern in his expression. 14 minutes was slow, even for a first attempt. If she improved by 2 minutes over the remaining 3 weeks, which would be exceptional progress, she'd still be more than 3 minutes away from the record. That night, Sarah called her brother Carlos. He was stationed in Germany now, working as a logistics coordinator for army operations in Europe. They didn't speak often, but she needed to talk to someone who understood what it meant to push beyond your limits in service of something bigger than yourself. "You sound tired, Hermana," Carlos said after they'd exchanged updates about their respective assignments. "I'm tired. I'm attempting something that might be beyond what I'm capable of." She explained the obstacle course record, the training, the upcoming preliminary assessment. Carlos listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that showed he understood both the physical and mental challenges she was facing. "What does success look like to you?" he asked finally. "Is it breaking the record, or is it something else?" Sarah had been asking herself the same question for weeks. Breaking the record would be incredible, but it was also statistically unlikely. So what was she really chasing? "I think success is finding out what I'm truly capable of when everything is on a line. And what if what you're truly capable of isn't enough to break the record? Then at least I'll know. And I'll know that I gave everything I had to find out." Carlos was quiet for a moment. "Then, that sounds like success to me, regardless of the time on the clock." The conversation stayed with Sarah through the final weeks of preparation. The pressure to break the record was real, but so was the opportunity to discover something about herself that could only be learned through attempting something that scared her. The preliminary assessment was scheduled for a Friday morning, 4 weeks after her conversation with Commander Walsh. Sarah had improved significantly. Her practice runs were now consistently under 12 minutes, and she'd managed an 11-minute, 40-second run during her best session. But 11 minutes and 40 seconds was still nearly 3 minutes slower than the record. Even if she improved dramatically for the official attempt, she'd need something close to a miracle to come within range of Mitchell's time. The night before the preliminary assessment, Rodriguez sat down with Sarah for a final planning session. "Tomorrow isn't about the record," he said. "Tomorrow is about proving you belong on that course. Complete it safely, show command that you're prepared for the real attempt, and worry about time later. What if I'm not fast enough for the real attempt to be worthwhile? What if you are?" Sarah looked at the training logs they'd kept over the past 4 weeks. Pages of times, technique notes, progress markers, and gradual improvements. She'd gotten stronger, faster, more efficient. She'd learned to push through discomfort that would have stopped her cold a month earlier. She developed skills she didn't know she needed and discovered capabilities she didn't know she possessed. But was it enough? "There's something I haven't told you," Rodriguez said. "Jackson's record attempt, the 9:15 I mentioned, that wasn't his first try. He'd attempted the course 6 times over 8 months. His first attempt was 13 minutes, 20 seconds. Sarah stared at him. 13:20. He improved by 4 minutes through training, practice, and understanding the course better. Your first attempt was 14:30. Your best time this week was 11:40. You've improved by almost 3 minutes in 4 weeks." The math was encouraging, but Sarah knew that improvement rarely followed a straight line. The easy gains came first. The final seconds were the hardest to find. "What do you really think my chances are?" she asked. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "I think you're going to surprise everyone, maybe even yourself." That night, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a small town in Texas where girls weren't supposed to want military careers, to boot camp where she'd proven she belonged in the Navy, to this moment when she was preparing to attempt something that most people would consider impossible. Tomorrow would determine whether she got the chance to chase the impossible. In 2 weeks, if she passed the preliminary assessment, she'd find out whether the impossible was actually within reach. Either way, she'd already accomplished something that the girl from Texas never could have imagined. She'd become someone who chased impossible dreams instead of accepting suitable limitations. That realization was worth more than any record could ever be. The preliminary assessment took place on a Friday morning when the California sun was just beginning to burn off the coastal fog. Sarah arrived at the Special Warfare Center at 0530, 2 hours before the scheduled test, unable to sleep and unwilling to sit around her room thinking about everything that could go wrong. She wasn't alone. Word had spread through the base about her attempt, and what had started as a personal challenge had become something larger. A test that would be watched by people who were curious, skeptical, supportive, or simply interested in seeing whether someone unexpected could accomplish something extraordinary. Master Chief Rodriguez met her at the entrance to the training complex, along with Chief Kane and 2 other SEAL instructors Sarah didn't recognize. Their presence was both reassuring and intimidating. These were men who had set standards for human performance, and they would be evaluating whether she was ready to attempt something that had defeated everyone who had tried it for 12 years. "How are you feeling, Martinez?" Rodriguez asked as they walked toward the course. "Nervous and ready," Sarah replied honestly. "Good. Nervous means you understand what you're attempting. Ready means you've prepared as well as you can." The obstacle course looked different in the early morning light. The obstacles that had become familiar through weeks of training now seemed larger, more challenging, more imposing than they had during practice sessions. Sarah reminded herself that this was the same course she'd been training on, with the same distances, the same heights, the same challenges. The only thing that had changed was the significance of this particular attempt. Commander Walsh arrived at 0700, along with several other officers Sarah recognized, but had never spoken with. The preliminary assessment had drawn more attention than anyone had anticipated, and Sarah could see both interest and skepticism in the faces of her observers. "Martinez," Walsh said, approaching Sarah near the starting line. "Are you prepared for this assessment?" "Yes, ma'am. Do you understand that this is not about breaking the record today? This is about demonstrating that you can complete the course safely and efficiently enough to warrant a formal record attempt." "Understand, ma'am." Walsh studied Sarah's face for a moment. "Good luck." At 0730, Sarah stood at the starting line of the obstacle course for her preliminary assessment. The goal was simple: complete the 12 obstacles in under 13 minutes without any major errors or safety violations. It was a reasonable standard that acknowledged she was still learning the course while ensuring she was capable of attempting the actual record. Rodriguez reviewed the assessment criteria one final time. 13 minutes or better, complete all obstacles, no safety violations. "That's all you need to do today." Sarah nodded, trying to calm her breathing and focus on the first obstacle. She'd learned that the course was won or lost based on the first 3 challenges. If she could complete those efficiently, she'd have the energy and confidence needed for the more demanding obstacles that followed. "Ready," Rodriguez called. "Ready, go." Sarah exploded from the starting line with more intensity than she'd used in any practice session. The first obstacle, a series of low hurdles, flew by in a blur of controlled movement. Her timing was perfect, her form efficient, her pace sustainable. The second obstacle, a rope climb, had been her biggest struggle during early training. Now it felt almost routine. Sarah attacked the rope with confidence, using the leg-wrapping technique Rodriguez had taught her, pulling herself up with steady rhythm while conserving energy for the challenges ahead. Halfway up the rope, she made the mistake of looking down at her observers. The sight of a dozen people watching her every movement sent a jolt of adrenaline through her system that nearly caused her to miss her next hand placement. "Focus," she told herself, one obstacle at a time. The wall traverse, which had seemed impossible during her first attempts, now felt manageable. Sarah moved across the handholds with deliberate precision, taking the time to place each hand and foot correctly rather than rushing and risking a fall that would end her assessment immediately. By the fourth obstacle, Sarah was ahead of her target pace. More importantly, she was feeling strong and controlled. The weeks of training had built not just physical capability, but confidence in her ability to execute under pressure. The tire carry had always been her least favorite obstacle, but today it felt different. Instead of fighting the 200-pound tire, Sarah worked with it, using momentum and technique to move efficiently rather than relying on pure strength. As she approached the midpoint of the course, Sarah allowed herself to think about time. If she maintained her current pace, she'd finish well under the 13-minute requirement. More surprisingly, she was on track for a time that would put her in range of considering a serious record attempt. Then, the seventh obstacle nearly ended everything. The balance beam section required crossing a narrow beam suspended 4 feet above the ground. It was a test of concentration and body control that had seemed straightforward during practice. But today, with adrenaline coursing through her system and fatigue beginning to affect her fine motor control, Sarah misjudged her foot placement halfway across. She felt herself falling, arms windmilling as she tried to regain balance. For a moment that seemed to last forever, she was certain she was going to hit the ground and fail the assessment. But somehow muscle memory and instinct took over. Sarah managed to twist her body as she fell, catching the beam with her hands and pulling herself back up in one fluid motion. She'd lost precious seconds, but she was still on the beam and still in the assessment. The near fall served as a reminder that the course demanded respect. Every obstacle required full attention and perfect execution. One small mistake could end everything, regardless of how well the rest of the attempt was going. Sarah forced herself to slow down slightly, focusing on precision rather than speed for the remaining obstacles. The rope traverse at the end of the course was particularly challenging when fatigued, and she needed to ensure she had enough strength and concentration to complete it successfully. The 8th, 9th, and 10th obstacles passed in a blur of controlled effort. Sarah could feel her energy reserves dropping, but her technique remained solid. Rodriguez's voice echoed in her mind. Technique doesn't tire. Technique is what carries you through when strength fails. As Sarah approached the final 2 obstacles, she could hear voices from the observation area, but couldn't make out individual words. She forced herself to ignore the distraction and focus entirely on the movements ahead. The 11th obstacle, a crawling section under low barriers, required her to move on hands and knees while staying as low as possible. It was exhausting for the shoulders and demanding for mental focus, but Sarah had practiced it hundreds of times. She moved through the section with mechanical precision, emerging at the far end ready for the final challenge. The rope traverse was the obstacle that had defeated more strong candidates than any other. It required moving hand over hand across a rope suspended above a sand pit, using only upper body strength and grip endurance. By this point in the course, most people's hands and forearms were exhausted, making the traverse a true test of mental toughness as much as physical capability. Sarah grabbed the rope and began moving across the 20-foot span. Her hands were slippery with sweat, her forearms burning with fatigue, but her technique was solid. Hand over hand, maintaining rhythm, not looking down at the sand below. Halfway across, Sarah's grip began to slip. She could feel her hands sliding on the rope, her fingers struggling to maintain purchase. Panic tried to creep in her mind. If she fell here, she'd have to start the traverse over, adding precious time to her total. Instead of panicking, Sarah adjusted her technique. She moved more quickly, trading sustainable pace for intensity, rushing to complete the traverse before her grip failed entirely. With 3 feet remaining, Sarah's left hand lost its grip on the rope. For a terrifying moment, she hung by one hand above the sand pit, her body weight pulling her toward what would be a failed assessment. But her right hand held, and Sarah managed to swing her left hand back to the rope, completing the final few moves with pure determination overriding the screaming fatigue in her forearms. When her feet touched the ground beyond the final obstacle, Sarah had completed the preliminary assessment. She stumbled forward a few steps trying to catch her breath and process what had just happened. Rodriguez was immediately at her side with a stopwatch. 11 minutes, 58 seconds, he announced. Sarah stared at him. 11:58 was not just under the 13-minute requirement. It was faster than her best practice time by almost 2 minutes. More importantly, it was a time that put a record attempt within the realm of possibility rather than fantasy. "How do you feel?" Rodriguez asked. "Like I just learned something about myself," Sarah replied. Commander Walsh approached with what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Congratulations, Martinez. You've earned your record attempt." As word of Sarah's assessment time spread through the observation group, Sarah could see expressions changing from skeptical to impressed to curious about what might happen during an actual record attempt. 11:58 was a time that demanded respect from anyone who understood the course. That afternoon, Sarah sat in Chief Kane's office for a debrief of the assessment and planning for the record attempt, now scheduled for 2 weeks later. "What surprised you most about today?" Kane asked. Sarah thought about the near fall on the balance beam, the moment when her grip almost failed on the rope traverse, the way adrenaline had both helped and hindered her performance. How much mental toughness mattered. "I was physically prepared, but there were moments when the difference between success and failure was entirely mental." Kane nodded. "That's going to be even more important during the record attempt. The pressure will be higher, the stakes will be clear, and you'll be chasing a time that requires not just completing the course, but completing it nearly perfectly. Do you think it's possible?" Honestly, Kane was quiet for a moment. 2 months ago, I would have said no. Today, after watching you complete that course in under 12 minutes, I think you might surprise everyone. That evening, Sarah called her parents to tell them about the assessment. Her mother was proud but worried, excited but concerned about what a record attempt might involve. Her father was more direct. "You did something today that no one thought you could do," he said. "That's already a victory, Mija. Everything else is just details." But Sarah knew the details mattered. The difference between 11 minutes, 58 seconds, and 8 minutes, 47 seconds was more than 3 minutes. In the world of elite athletic performance, 3 minutes might as well be 3 hours. Still, something had changed during the preliminary assessment. Sarah had discovered reserves of capability she didn't know she possessed. She'd learned to function effectively under pressure that would have overwhelmed her just months earlier. She'd proven that the impossible might just be the unlikely in disguise. 2 weeks remained before her record attempt. 2 weeks to refine her technique, optimize her strategy, and prepare mentally for a challenge that would demand everything she had learned about pushing beyond her perceived limitations. 2 weeks to discover whether a girl from small-town Texas could accomplish something that the elite warriors of the Navy SEALs had been trying to achieve for 12 years. 2 weeks to find out if impossible was just another word for something that hadn't happened yet. The 2 weeks between Sarah's preliminary assessment and her record attempt passed with an intensity that made the previous month of training feel like a warm-up. Everything was different now. The stakes, the pressure, the level of attention, and Sarah's own understanding of what she might be capable of achieving. Word of her 11:58 assessment time had spread throughout the base and beyond. What had started as a personal challenge had become something larger, a test of what was possible when someone unexpected decided to chase something extraordinary. Master Chief Rodriguez redesigned Sarah's training program with surgical precision. Instead of building general fitness and technique, they focused on optimizing every element that could save seconds during a record attempt. Hand placement on the rope climb, stride length during running sections, energy conservation strategies for the middle obstacles, split-second decision-making during the complex movements. "We're not training for completion anymore," Rodriguez explained during their first planning session after the assessment. "We're training for perfection. Every movement, every transition, every breath needs to be optimized for speed without sacrificing safety." Sarah's practice runs became exercises in controlled aggression. She learned to push her body to the absolute edge of its capabilities while maintaining the technique and mental clarity needed to execute complex movements flawlessly. It was a delicate balance that required constant calibration, too conservative, and she'd never approach record pace, too aggressive, and she'd make mistakes that could cost her precious seconds or cause injury. The psychological preparation was equally intense. Sports psychologist Dr. Lisa Chun began working with Sarah to develop mental strategies for managing the pressure of a formal record attempt. Unlike the preliminary assessment, which had been about proving capability, the record attempt would be about performing under scrutiny that would either validate years of training or expose the limitations of her preparation. The difference between a good performance and a record-breaking performance is often mental, Dr. Chun explained during one of their sessions. Your body is capable of the physical demands. The question is whether your mind can maintain focus and composure when everything is on the line. They practiced visualization techniques, stress management strategies, and methods for maintaining concentration during fatigue. Sarah learned to mentally rehearse not just successful obstacle completion, but recovery from mistakes and adaptation when things didn't go according to plan. What's your biggest fear about the record attempt? Dr. Chun asked during their final session. Sarah had been thinking about that question for weeks. Letting people down, proving that all the doubters were right, that I was reaching for something beyond what I'm capable of. And what if you do fall short of the record? What would that mean? It would mean I gave everything I had to chase something extraordinary. Even if I fall short, that effort still matters. Dr. Chin smiled. Remember that perspective when the pressure builds. The outcome is important, but it doesn't define the value of the attempt. 3 days before the record attempt, Sarah received a surprise visitor. Petty Officer James Mitchell, the man who had set the current record 12 years earlier, requested a meeting. Sarah had studied videos of his record run countless times, analyzing his technique and timing, but she'd never spoken with him directly. Mitchell was now a civilian contractor working with Navy Special Warfare, still fit and intense, but carrying the weathered confidence of someone who had proven himself in the crucible of elite performance. He found Sarah during her final practice session on the obstacle course. Martinez? I am James Mitchell. I understand you're coming after my record. Sarah stopped her cool-down routine, suddenly, conscious that she was meeting a legend whose achievement had inspired her pursuit of excellence. Yes, sir. It's an honor to meet you. Honors mine. I've been watching videos of your practice runs. You got something special. Technique, determination, intelligent approach to problem solving. Mind if we talk? They sat in the shade near the course while Sarah tried to process the surreal experience of discussing record-breaking strategy with the man whose record she was trying to break. What do you remember most about your record run? Sarah asked. Mitchell was quiet for a moment, looking out at the obstacles that had defined a significant moment in his life. The feeling that everything had to be perfect. I'd attempted the record 4 times before I succeeded. Each time, I learned something that made the next attempt better. By the 5th attempt, I wasn't just running the course, I was having a conversation with it. A conversation? Each obstacle told me what it needed from me. The rope climb needed patience and technique. The wall traverse needed confidence and precision. The tire carry needed strategy and mental toughness. When I finally broke the record, it felt like I was listening to the course and responding perfectly to what each challenge required. Sarah nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Her best practice runs had felt similar, less like fighting the obstacles and more like flowing through them with appropriate intensity. Any advice for my attempt? Mitchell studied her face for a moment. Don't try to beat my time. Try to run your perfect race. If you can do that, the time will take care of itself. Do you want a record to stand? I want it to be broken by someone who earns it. From what I've seen, you're that person. Good luck. As Mitchell walked away, Sarah felt a shift in her mental preparation. She was no longer trying to overcome someone else's achievement. She was trying to discover her own perfect performance. The night before her record attempt, Sarah barely slept. Not from nervousness, but from a restless energy that made relaxation impossible. She'd done everything possible to prepare. Her technique was optimized. Her fitness was peaked. Her mental preparation was complete. All that remained was execution. She called her brother Carlos, who was now following her progress from Germany along with what seemed like half the military personnel he worked with. "How are you feeling, Humana?" he asked. "Ready, scared, excited, all at the same time." "Good. That sounds like the right combination for doing something extraordinary. What if I fall short? Then you'll have attempted something that most people wouldn't even consider. That's already extraordinary." Sarah looked out her window at the training complex, illuminated by floodlights for night operations. Tomorrow, she would either accomplish something that had seemed impossible just months earlier, or she would learn valuable lessons about the difference between dreams and reality. Either way, she would know that she had given everything to find out what she was truly capable of. The morning of the record attempt arrived with clear skies and perfect weather conditions. Sarah woke at 0400, ate a carefully planned breakfast, and began her pre-performance routine with the mechanical precision of someone who had rehearsed every detail. By 0700, the Special Warfare Center was busier than Sarah had ever seen it. Word of the attempt had spread throughout the Navy community and beyond. She recognized officers from across the base, SEAL team members who had come to witness the attempt, and even some civilians who had connections to the military community. Commander Walsh approached Sarah during her warm-up routine. "The press has taken interest in your story. There are reporters here from Navy publications and civilian outlets. Are you comfortable with that level of attention?" Sarah hadn't anticipated media attention, but she'd learned that extraordinary attempts often drew unexpected interest. "As long as they don't interfere with the attempt, I'm fine with it." "They won't. But understand that this is no longer just about you or even just about our command. You're representing something larger. The idea that excellence doesn't always come from expected sources." The formal record attempt was scheduled for 0900. Sarah spent the hour before her attempt reviewing technique with Rodriguez, visualizing her race strategy with Dr. Chun, and managing the adrenaline that threatened to overwhelm her preparation. At 0845, she stood at the starting line of the obstacle course for what might be her only chance at Mitchell's record. The course looked exactly as it had during dozens of practice runs, but the atmosphere was electric with anticipation and possibility. Rodriguez checked his stopwatch and reviewed the timing protocol one final time. Chief Kane confirmed that all safety measures were in place. Commander Walsh ensured that official witnesses were positioned correctly to verify the attempt. "Martinez," Walsh said, approaching Sarah for final comments, "regardless of what happens in the next 9 minutes, you've already accomplished something remarkable. You've proven that courage and determination can overcome conventional expectations." "Thank you, ma'am. But I'm not done yet." Sarah walked to the starting line with the focused calm that had carried her through every significant challenge in her military career. The girl from Texas who had wanted something more than what everyone expected her to want was about to find out whether impossible was just another word for something that hadn't happened yet. Rodriguez raised his arm. "On your mark." Sarah settled into starting position, her entire world narrowing to the first obstacle 30 feet ahead. "Go!" Sarah exploded from the starting line with intensity that surprised even her. The months of training had built capabilities she was still discovering, and today she was going to find out exactly what those capabilities could accomplish. The first 4 obstacles flew by in a blur of perfect execution. Her rope climb was flawless, technique and strength combining for the fastest ascent she'd ever achieved. The wall traverse felt effortless, her hands moving from hold to hold with confidence born from countless repetitions. By the tire carry, Sarah was ahead of record pace. More importantly, she was feeling strong and controlled, moving through the course with the flowing efficiency that Mitchell had described as having a conversation with the obstacles. The middle section of the course was where records were won or lost. Fatigue began to accumulate. Mental focus became harder to maintain, and small technical errors could cascade into significant time losses. Sarah had prepared for this challenge by practicing under extreme fatigue, learning to maintain precision when every instinct told her to rush. As she approached the balance beam, the obstacle that had nearly ended her preliminary assessment. Sarah forced herself to slow down slightly. Better to lose half a second through caution than 10 seconds through a fall and recovery. She crossed the beam with perfect balance, maintaining the controlled aggression that was carrying her through the course faster than she'd ever imagined possible. With 3 obstacles remaining, Sarah allowed herself a quick glance at Rodriguez's position. He was tracking her split times, and his expression suggested that something special was happening. The rope traverse at the end had always been her biggest concern. Upper body fatigue at this point in the course made the 20-foot crossing a test of both physical capability and mental toughness. But today, Sarah's grip felt strong, and her technique was perfect, hand over hand across the rope, maintaining rhythm despite the burning in her forearms. No hesitation, no wasted movement, no fear of falling. Just efficient progression toward the finish line that represented months of preparation and years of dreaming about achieving something extraordinary. When Sarah's feet touched the ground beyond the final obstacle, she knew something significant had happened. She could tell from the expression on Rodriguez's face, from the sudden silence among the observers, from the way time seemed to freeze for just a moment. "Time!" Rodriguez called out, looking at his stopwatch with an expression of amazement. 8 minutes, 39 seconds. The silence exploded into cheers and disbelief. Sarah had not just broken Mitchell's 12-year-old record. She had shattered it by 8 seconds, a margin that represented a complete redefinition of what was possible on that course. As Sarah tried to catch her breath and process what had just happened, she was surrounded by congratulations, amazement, and the realization that she had accomplished something that would change how people thought about human potential and the power of unexpected determination. Commander Walsh was the first to reach her with official congratulations. "Martinez, you have just set a new course record that will stand as inspiration for every person who has ever been told that their dreams are too big for their circumstances." Later that evening, as Sarah sat alone reflecting on the day's events, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a small town where girls weren't expected to want extraordinary things, through military training that had taught her to push beyond perceived limitations, to this day when she had proven that impossible was often just another word for something that hadn't been tried by the right person at the right time. The record was meaningful, but it wasn't the most important thing she had accomplished. She had learned that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about being afraid and choosing to pursue excellence anyway. She had discovered that preparation and determination could overcome almost any obstacle. Most importantly, she had proven that extraordinary achievements often came from ordinary people who refused to accept ordinary limitations. As she called her parents to share the news, Sarah realized that breaking the record was just the beginning of what she might accomplish. Today had been about proving what was possible. Tomorrow would be about using that knowledge to chase even bigger dreams. The girl from Texas had become a woman who broke records and barriers. But more than that, she had become someone who inspired others to believe that their own impossible dreams might be possible after all.